In February 1999, How the Grinch Stole Christmas was known as I. The classic 1957 children's book by Dr. Seuss and as the 1966 television program of the same name. As a movie, it existed, as yet, only as a glimmer in the eyes of director Ron Howard and producer Brian Grazer of Imagine Entertainment, who had gone so far as to persuade Jim Carrey to star in it and Universal Pictures to distribute it. But there was no script, no sets, no props, no wardrobe, no makeup design, just Howard with the notion, I think I can make a pretty good movie from this book. 1 year of frenetic 365 days later, the sets torn down, the set dressing, props, and costumes all stored, Howard and Grazer walked into screening room 7 at Universal Studios in Hollywood and sat down to watch editors Dan Hanley and Mike Hill's first cut of the movie Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. For the first time since he began the movie, Howard was able to come to the studio and not worry about yesterday's, today's, or tomorrow's shooting. He indulged in the luxury of simply enjoying the movie and taking satisfaction in the fact that it now actually existed on film. He delighted in Jim Carrey's performance, in the world he and his crew had created, and sat there, rooting for the movie. That afternoon, he would watch it again and begin the process known to directors as the slaying of the firstborn, that is, cutting the scenes they thought they couldn't live without. On nearly every movie, I've had situations that if I was told you cannot shoot that scene, I would have said, I quit, I can't do the movie without it, and in every instance, once I got into the editing room, I cut the scene without a second thought. Editing is a critical juncture in the filmmaking process. Howard must be able to distance himself from the hard work over the past months of filming and be able to look at a shot and say, who the heck did that shot? Still, editing is the purest aspect of filmmaking. No politics are involved, just hard choices. One director's first cut of a 1999 movie clocked in at a derriere-numbing 4 hours. The director was pleased with this length and declared to the studio no major cuts needed to be made. The studio, not surprisingly, disagreed. Editing is when you can't operate in theories. The time for that is when you're shooting the movie and you have a lot of options as you gather the raw material, notes Howard. Back in February 1999, Howard knew the visual raw material sets, costumes, set dressing, props, and makeup and hair designs all would have to be fabricated from scratch. Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas turned out to be a movie that was so large in scope and replete with complicated technical issues, all of which did not come cheap, less expensive than Titanic, more than the Blair Witch Project, that nothing could be taken for granted. It took what should have been the sheer, giddy pleasure out of it for me, but every now and then I could relax and be amazed that I was actually standing in the middle of Whoville, says Howard. It was all inspired by Dr. Seuss's brilliant character the Grinch, who, as Seuss's biographers Judith and Neil Morgan wrote, had become as vivid a character to Americans as Charles Dickens' Scrooge. While he was expending time and energy on the movie's visuals, Howard was equally preoccupied with the other half of the raw material, the script, and how to keep developing the characters in a way that he understood and related to while acknowledging the whimsy and imagination of Dr. Seuss's fable. To be honest, I really don't think in vivid, visual terms, says Howard. I think in psychological and emotional conditions, and then the visual world is something I can come to understand. All movies, even fantasy, begin with character for me.